It's Brody again. Probably get at least 25 views on this video, so hopefully that will make a difference. I wanted to talk today. Woken up about 4 a.m. I had about 6 hours sleep, which was alright. I wanted to try and unify 3 different conceptual analyses using historical kind of prevalence and also a kind of fact-based but conspiratorial set of evidence, and also a sort of and I guess another conspiratorial reference. It's a really weird area of research, but I reckon probably be quite interesting. So here's a research paper entitled "The Quantum Nexus of Non-Local Cognition, Unifying Shamanism, Channeling and Remote Viewing Through the Implicate and Akashic Orders." So the anomalous cognition triad and the crisis of classical physics, the persistent claims of information retrieval through non-sensory means, historically categorised as divination or mysticism, and recently codified in military research, present a profound challenge to the conventional scientific understanding of reality. This report analyses 3 seemingly disparate practices: the ancestral traditions of shamanism, the spiritualist phenomena of channeling exemplified by automatic writing and the work of Edgar Cayce, and the Cold War military research known as remote viewing, conducting under programs like Project Stargate. All 3 modalities report the attainment of specific fact-based information regarding distant or obscure targets, events or processes. Success that's fundamentally inexplicable if reality is strictly governed by the constraints of classical Newtonian physics. The objective is to formulate a scientifically plausible, unified hypothesis that resolves this anomaly. This hypothesis posits that these practices are culturally and methodologically divergent protocols designed to access a singular underlying universal informational field. The explanatory framework must necessarily extend beyond reductionist materialism, drawing specifically on theoretical concepts developed in quantum physics and systems theory, namely David Bohm's implicate order and Ervin Laszlo's Akashic field, or A field as it's abbreviated to, often correlated with zero-point energy field. That gets into some really bizarre areas like anti-gravitics and other stuff which you just won't find on the internet. But there's some stuff you can find, and it is quite tangible, and it's not that difficult to get hold of. So mainstream skepticism towards parapsychological phenomena, including remote viewing, is often rooted in the absence of an accepted theoretical mechanism complete with established physical laws. The historical rejection of scientific theories such as Alfred Wegener's continental drift hypothesis demonstrates that compelling evidence alone is often insufficient until a viable theoretical model is provided to explain the underlying mechanism. Therefore, the core of this investigation is the provision of an ontological mechanism, a shift from the domain of magic to the structure of reality itself, where space and time are emergent rather than fundamental properties. The crucial convergent point among all 3 modalities is the prerequisite of a controlled altered state of consciousness, ASC, which facilitates a cognitive frame shift from localized sensory processing to non-local intuitive mode of retrieval. The structure of this analysis will first establish the evidentiary basis for successful fact-based information retrieval across all 3 fields, followed by an in-depth examination of the quantum frameworks necessary to contain such information, culminating in a synthesized model of non-local cognition. So, second part is a documentation of successful information acquisition. The corollary claims the premise of unification requires confirmation that non-local information retrieval is a functional reality, irrespective of the cultural context or historical separation of the practitioners. So, military case, Project Stargate and empirical non-locality. Project Stargate represents the most rigorous state-sponsored attempt to formalise and utilise anomalous cognition for intelligence purposes. Between 1975 and 1995, it spent about 20 million, commissioned by the US Central Intelligence Agency and overseen by various intelligence agencies, including the DIA, if you don't know who they are, Google them, sought to determine the potential military applications of psychic phenomena, specifically remote viewing. While a post-termination CIA review in the 90s officially concluded that the information provided was often vague and included irrelevant and erroneous data and was never useful in any intelligence operation, the same review critically conceded that statistically significant effects were observed in laboratory experiments. The existence of these statistical effects confirms that the phenomenon is not entirely spurious, but rather that the challenge lay in translating the raw non-linear data into actionable high-fidelity intelligence output, suggesting an inherent constraint in the data interface rather than the retrieval mechanism itself. The research conducted at Stanford Research Institute, very prestigious, yielded findings critical to the ontological hypothesis. Distance and physical shielding do not affect the results of remote viewing. This observation is fundamental because it discounts all explanations relying on known electromagnetic wave transmissions as carriers of the information. If distance and shielding are irrelevant, the interaction must be non-local, operating outside the conventional constraints of Euclidean space and time. Just Google Euclidean physics or Euclidean geometry if that doesn't make sense to you. Declassified documents cite several types of successful application investigations, demonstrating accuracy across spatial and temporal dimensions. So the first one is close-in shielded viewing. So a viewer accurately described the Berkeley Bevatron, including its function. This is an energy expander and characteristics, pure energy circulating. Second one was long-distance retrocognitive viewing. So a bit different. A viewer provided details of a Ucart castle in Scotland, describing the structures and atmosphere. Tall structure with a conical roof, similar to a castle, musty, high, large, cavernous hall, 14 hours after the target event. Then you've got precognitive viewing. That's where I come in. So the information was accurately obtained regarding the Danube River area in Bratislava, Czechoslovakia, 24 hours prior to the event. Although the overall potential for predictive tasks was judged low, the occurrence of verified precognition fundamentally challenges the linear unidirectional nature of time as understood in classical physics. The military developed a formalised technical protocol known as Controlled Remote Viewing, CRV, pioneered by Ingo Swann. The success of CRV, which consisted of approximately 6 sequential training stages designed to train individuals possessing no known natural psychic abilities to achieve extreme accuracy, underscores the systematic nature of the phenomenon. This disciplined, structured approach, moving from simple terrain discrimination to complex abstract concepts, can be viewed as the industrialized secular counterpart to ancient shamanic preparation, designed to standardize the transition into non-local intuitive states. So the spiritualist case, Edgar Cayce and the Akashic Records. Case of Edgar Cayce, old school dude from 77 to 45, provides a voluminous historical record of factually successful information acquisition presented within a spiritualist framework. So known as the Sleeping Prophet, Cayce derived over 14,000 readings while in self-induced hypnotic sleep state, providing intuitive insights into matters ranging from healing and reincarnation to prophecy and ancient civilizations. Cayce's most empirically significant contributions lay in medical diagnosis and treatment recommendations for ailments of patients often physically distant from him. These readings were meticulously transcribed, witnessed, and filed verbatim by the Association for Research and Enlightenment. Don't know who they are, never heard of them. Demonstrating that the information provided was, in broad areas, verifiable and reliable. Cayce was able to report on temperature, blood pressure, and anatomical details as if conducting a physical examination. The success of his holistic and alternative medicine approaches, combined with the detailed documentation, constitute a major historical archive of anomalous cognition. Cayce attributed the source of his information to the Akashic Records, or the Book of Life, which he believed contained the history of every soul since creation and connected all beings. Crucially, his intuitive description of the source aligns conceptually with later quantum theories. He stated that records exist within the skein of space and time and are inscribed on a form of etheric energy. This terminology bridges the metaphysical concept of universal memory with the energetic requirements of a fundamental non-material informational field. So the anthropological case, shamanic divination and universal antiquity, shamanism is argued to be one of humanity's most ancient and universal spiritual practices, with evidence spanning cultures and epochs predating organised religions. And anthropological studies recognise the shaman's primary function, utilising spirit intervention to acquire information necessary for community survival, such as healing, protection, or locating resources. The core mechanism of the information retrieval in shamanism is the deliberate induction of the shamanic state of consciousness, a distinct subcategory of altered states of consciousness. This state is characterized by narrowed physical awareness, expanded inner imagery, and an experience of spiritual travel or soul flight. Techniques to induce this state often include rhythmic drumming, contemplation, or the use of psychoactive substances. A function performed by shamans is the functional equivalent of a modern intelligence operation. For instance, the Tungus shaman in Siberia enters a trance to locate game for hunters during poor hunting season, providing specific, verifiable geographical information. This act of locating distant targets aligns directly with the objectives of military remote viewing. The ancient Greek descriptions of shamans, like Homotimus and Clazomenae, whose soul was thought to travel far and wide to observe distant events while his body lay inanimate, a phenomenon described as bilocation, demonstrate that the conceptual framework for non-local fact-based perception has existed throughout human history. This similarity between the military remote viewing operative, described as moving like ghosts through the ether to gather intelligence, and ancient shaman performing soul flight underscores the continuity of the operational mechanism across millennia, separated only by cultural context. So the non-classical framework dimensions of universal information. So to provide a cohesive explanation for non-local information acquisition that supersedes classical physics, it is necessary to integrate two specific theoretical models derived from post-classical mechanics that define reality structures where space and time are secondary, emergent properties. So this guy, David Bohm, had an implicate order theory, the ontological container. So theoretical physicist David Bohm developed the concepts of the implicate enfolded and explicate unfolded orders, specifically to address the paradoxical and non-local behaviours of subatomic particles described by quantum mechanics. Bohm's theory posits that the reality we perceive, the explicit order, characterised by linear time, defined space, and separately existing material particles, is not the fundamental reality. Instead, the implicate order is proposed as a deeper, more primary ontological structure, pre-space, where entities are enfolded and where space and time constraints are superseded. Bohm argued that the quantum mechanical mathematics describing particle behaviour primarily deals with the structure of this implicate's pre-space and how the explicate order emerges from it. The dynamic process mediating between these two orders is termed hollow movement, which is analogous to a hologram. The hollow movement ensures that every part of the universe is not only connected to every other part, but fundamentally contains the whole in a constant process of enfolding and unfolding. When a remote viewer or a shaman accesses distant information, they are in fact performing a momentary act of unfolding localized data contained within the non-localized implicate order. Crucially, Bohm's model necessitates a departure from Cartesian split between mind and matter. The theory posits that consciousness is not merely an emergent function of the brain, but a universal property, part of the fundamental structure of the cosmos and inherently available to all life. This connection between the physical universe and consciousness at its most fundamental level challenges the reductionist view, legitimizing the possibility of conscious access to ontological fabric of reality itself. For consciousness to retrieve non-local information, it must itself be non-local, a property guaranteed by its deep connection to the implicate order. Ervin Laszlo's connectivity hypothesis and the A field. Building upon quantum mechanics and general systems theory, philosopher and scientist Ervin Laszlo provides a complementary framework that assists a specific physical medium to the universal information repository. Laszlo's work explicitly connects the ancient metaphysical concepts of the Akashic record with modern physics. So he argued that the Akashic field, which is like a sort of hippie thing, people think that you've got the records of all of your ancestors in your DNA, which, kind of stands up to scrutiny in a sense, or A field, is the scientific equivalent of 0-point energy field or quantum vacuum. the ubiquitous, subtle sea of fluctuating energies that underlies all space. So this A-field thing functions as the universe's constant and enduring memory. It conserves and conveys information about all that's ever happened in the cosmos and relates it to all that's yet to happen. This concept provides a tangible, energetic structure that mirrors Case's intuitive description of the Akashic records residing in etheric energy and the, I've never heard that word, skein of space and time. Laszlo's connectivity hypothesis suggests that quantum coherence and energetic connectivity play a crucial role in maintaining system-wide organisation, linking the quantum domain to biological and cosmological systems. In this framework, the A-field is the ultimate womb of creation, wherein the perception of boundaries of separation, the perceived distance between the remote viewer and the target, are understood as mere perceptual tricks or illusions, Maya, as Buddhists like to call it. Retrieval of information, whether by a shaman locating game or a military operative describing a distant weapon facility, is therefore understood as tuning into the universal, non-local network, the A-field. When integrating Bohm and Laszlo, the implicate order provides an essential ontology, the structural depth where non-locality is mandated, and the A-field, or zero-point energy, provides the energetic medium, the dynamic physical substrate that conserves and conveys the information across deep reality structure. So phenomenological convergence, I said that wrong, phenomenological convergence, the access protocol altered states of consciousness. So despite the vast disparities in culture, intent and terminology, shamanism, channeling and remote viewing share a fundamental prerequisite, the initiation of a distinct cognitive state designed to decouple the mind from the immediate localized sensory environment. Mechanism of the frame shift, the success of anomalous cognition hinges on eliminating the suppressing the perceptual cognitive informational processing mode, which is characteristic of the ordinary state of consciousness and restricted by classical physics. The goal of all induction techniques is to initiate a cognitive frame shift to the non-local intuitive approach, opening an alternative channel for environmental information that's not constrained by space-time. So altered states of consciousness employed vary significantly in form but not function. So the shamanic states of consciousness induced through rhythmic stimulation, drumming, isolation or fasting, these states are characterized by narrow awareness of physical surroundings and an altered sense of self, essential for the shamanic journey or soul flight. Channeling trance. So Edgar Cayce utilized a form of self-hypnotic sleep characterized by deep breathing and rapid eye movement, guided by a conductor to access a receptive state of deep consciousness. Controlled remote viewing. The 6-stage CRV protocol is a formal, highly structured cognitive training regimen designed to suppress analytical thought, noise or analytical overlay, and cultivate the intuitive reception of non-local data. The consistency across these three modalities demonstrates that the access mechanism is biological, universal, and dependent on the purposeful deactivation of the brain's localized filtering mechanisms that normally enforce the constraints of the implicate order. When the coping capacity of the ordinary perceptual cognitive mode is exhausted, the non-local intuitive channel is systematically engaged. Refining the signal, structure, emotion, and the uncertainty principle. The data reviewed from the implicate order A-field is inherently nonlinear and comprehensive, requiring significant effort to translate into linear explicate facts, for example, coordinates, names, and dates. The challenges faced by the Stargate program underscore this difficulty. Successful laboratory results failed to consistently yield precise, actionable intelligence. The military's technical approach, CRV, attempted to systematize the translation process. So by progressing through rigorous stages, from simple topological forms to complex abstractions, this training acted as a forced cognitive filter, imposing linear structure onto the non-linear data. The structure is necessary to mitigate the tendency for the raw immersive analog data to be corrupted by the viewer's analytical mind. Furthermore, recent research into the cognitive mechanisms underlying remote viewing suggests that emotional intelligence plays a vital role, positively correlating with hits in remote viewing experiments. So this finding is significant because it indicates that information retrieval is not a purely passive mechanical process, but one that's actively mediated by intuitive or emotional processing capacity to effectively filter and interpret the non-linear holistic information extracted from the A field. The ultimate limitation of this non-local retrieval system appears to be ontological, not methodological. So the observation that the shamanic journey, while transcending space-time, is limited by the uncertainty principle suggests that difficulties in obtaining highly detailed, precise data like ST parameters in the remote viewing reports are fundamental constraints imposed by the quantum nature of the source field. When consciousness attempts to extract specific localized data points from the non-localized quantum vacuum, principle of uncertainty introduces the irreducible noise, resulting in the characteristic vagueness documented in the Stargate results. So the unified hypothesis, the implicate information retrieval system, IIRS, the synthesis of military documentation, anthropological uniformity, spiritualist archives, and quantum ontology supports a unified theory, which is anomalous cognition being a reality-driven phenomenon based on the universal physical structure of the cosmos. There's three disparate practices function as protocols for an implicate information retrieval system. Model integration, ontology, and medium. So the IIRS model integrates the post-classical physics frameworks as a unified ontological architecture. The ontological structure of Bohm is the implicate order provides the foundational layer where all information is perpetually enfolded, unified, and beyond the constraints of distance or time. Consciousness, being intrinsically part of this order, possesses a latent ability to perceive it. The informational medium, the akashic field, is equivalent to a zero-point energy field. It serves as the dynamic, energetic storage substrate within the implicate order, providing the memory of the universe. And the retrieval process, the hollow movement, is an anomalous cognition occurs during the cognitive frame shift, allowing the individual to temporarily perceive the process of unfolding information from the implicate order. So the practitioner as transducer. In this unified model, the practitioner, whether an indigenous shaman, a trance channeler like Case, or a trained military remote viewer, functions as a biological transducer. The role is to facilitate the flow of non-local data from the A field, implicate, and translate it into the coherent descriptive information compatible with the explicate order, waking reality. The core difficulty lies not in the access, which is non-local and instantaneous, confirmed by Stargate's findings on distance, but in the translation. The successes of Case's medical diagnoses and the verified RV experiments confirm the existence of non-local data channel, but the vagueness and difficulty in precise localization observed in the military operational environments highlight the challenge of interpreting holistic quantum source data using linear analytical thought processes. So the contrast in nomenclature, the Stargate operative being considered a psychic spy or likened to the Jinn by adversaries versus the shaman performing soul flight is merely a cultural label applied to the same non-spatial, non-temporal act of information projection and retrieval. The legitimacy of the military claims when viewed through this ontological lens is not conspiracy, but rather the consequence of applied quantum reality. The failure of the Stargate program to consistently provide high fidelity intelligence therefore represents a failure of translation and decoding technology, not a failure of the underlying non-local phenomenon itself. So translation allegory as another fucking table, reconciling mysticism and physics. The fundamental unity of these three practices can be structurally demonstrated by mapping the traditional allegorical language onto the ontological definitions provided by Bohm and Laszlo. This translation confirms that metaphysical discourse acts as a rudimentary, intuitive description of the underlying quantum structure. So correlating allegory with quantum ontology. Right, so we've got metaphysical cultural allegory. The spirit world, occult realms, that's automatic writing, soul flight, which is shamanism, and the book of life, universal memory. How that translates into David Bohm's technology, he explains it using implicate order, unfolding from the implicate order, or the hollow movement. Laszlo says the same three things, which you probably can't remember because I've scrolled to the right and you can't see the whole fucking thing. Is the A field, the akashic field, non-local connectivity, or quantum coherence, and zero-point energy field, which is basically a massive secret that nobody can know about. But there's lots of stuff on the internet which suggests that there is a 0 point energy field. Read about it. You won't find anything on Wikipedia that tells you it's true, but it is basically true. Fundamental storage and continuity of reality, the mechanism of non-spatial, non-temporal conscious perception, and the medium containing all past and potential events. So the conclusion and ontological implications, the summary of the compelling conclusion, the incremental, tenuous, yet corollary link between shamanism, spiritualist channeling, and military remote viewing is resolved by the unified hypothesis. All three are distinct cultural expressions of an innate human capacity to interact with the fundamental structure of the cosmos, the implicate order, or the akashic field through the induction of a non-ordinary state of consciousness. The fact that Cold War military research established the non-dependence of remote viewing on distance and shielding, weird space there, provides critical physical data that enforces a paradigm shift away from classical mechanistic views. The phenomenon cannot be explained as a result of traditional energy transfer. It must be a function of the holographic, non-local nature of reality itself, where consciousness is inherently entangled with the cosmic informational field. The statistical successes confirmed by CIA and the documented fact-based claims of both ancient shamans and spiritualist mediums case serve as empirical anchors for the existence of the implicate information retrieval system. Implications for consciousness and ontology. The validation of the implicate information retrieval system necessitates a complete revision of the scientific ontology. Consciousness must be redefined as a non-local causal reality inherently connected to the structure of the universe, channeling the mechanistic view that restricts it to the localized brain. The individual is fundamentally in total contact with the implicate order. The practices of remote viewing, channeling, and shamanism are thus not impossible acts defined by extraordinary psychic power, but rather the normal function of universal consciousness operating outside the perceptual filtering mechanisms imposed by the explicate order's rigid structure of space and time. The political suppression and subsequent trivialization of military AC research, often interpreted as conspiracy, can be re-evaluated as an inevitable conflict arising from the difficulty of translating non-linear quantum reality into linear, actionable military intelligence. The failure to produce consistent, high-fidelity, explicate data does not invalidate the underlying implicate process. So recommendations for future research. Future investigation into anomalous cognition could or should abandon the pursuit of classical physics explanations and focus entirely on methodologies derived from quantum ontology. So research should concentrate on refining the cognitive interface, so developing improved ASC induction techniques and cognitive protocols, building upon the CRV framework to enhance the stability of non-local intuitive channel and minimize the introduction of analytical noise. Quantifying translation fidelity, designing metrics to assess the relationship between the quality of non-local input from the A field and the fidelity of linear output, explicate description, potentially utilizing Bohm's mathematical framework and describing the unfolding process, exploring emotional and intuitive mediation. Further study of the role of emotional intelligence in information retrieval recognizes that successful interfacing with the non-linear A field may require intuitive processing capabilities rather than purely rational or analytical skills. By embracing the paradigm of the implicate order and the akashic field, the phenomena of shamanism, channeling, and remote viewing shift from pseudo-scientific anomalies to crucial observational data, offering a pathway toward a genuinely holistic and unified understanding of information, consciousness, and the physical universe. My consciousness is quite tired now. I only have one cup of coffee. There's some stuff about Project Stargate, remote viewing, clairvoyant remote viewing, science and the Akashic Connector, blah, blah, blah. You can look at all these websites. I'll put all this into a link in the description. Let's have a look at thoughts. Thoughts aren't good for this one. Establishing the scope, gathering foundational evidence, identifying. This is the sort of process of how it put together this piece of research. But anyway, it's 5:53 now. I hope this makes sense to you. It's really cryptic, kind of fucking bizarre shit. But like, somebody somewhere will make sense of it, right? And like, I am not necessarily a proponent of, fringe scientific theories. I'm just some fucking fat, balding sociopath in a mental asylum. But if this is of use to you, and you can kind of look at the broad brushstrokes of what's in the video, I reckon, even if you talk about it, a lot of people don't believe in it. And like that facility that was closed in 95 by the CIA, I've read that actually still goes on. They still use it like extensively in various, like, the Ruskies and the Chinese and the UK all use the same technological. They use like technology and tangible physical stuff. So there's just an interesting thing you can look at called electrocrystal therapy. So basically, like, I've got one somewhere. Here's a piece of quartz. I carry this in my pocket all the time. It's really simple, but a piece of quartz has a massive amount of potential energy inside it, right? And crystalline structures mimic human DNA. Human DNA is crystalline in structure. The dude who discovered it's just popped his clogs. May rest in peace. But I don't really believe fully scientifically that crystal, keeping this in my pocket, changes my state of being or my consciousness. But on a kind of more subjective and open level, I do still think, having researched it, my mum was really into electrocrystal therapy, which is like the difference between crystal therapy, which is like where you go and pay an exorbitant fee to lie on a bed, and they put crystals on your body and sort of like, be a bit woo and pseudoscientific about it, versus electrocrystal therapy. Electrocrystal therapy is where you get like a machine and attach it to a crystal, and it focuses like high oscillation frequencies or various different things through the crystal wand, and then that is placed over various different endocrinal points on the body. I think that's more consistent. Again, people are going to say it's bullshit, and fair play to them. Let them, But for the ones who don't, it could make things better. And I guess that's my aim. Thanks for watching. Sorry for garbling bullshit. Don't listen to any of that shit. Just focus on what it says and look at the broad brushstrokes. And 5:56. Time for another coffee and a vape and a nice sit down. But thank you very much. Lots of love, Brody.